Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's workshop on planning your renovation. My name is Ryan Keene. I'm the Vice President of Lending at Ardent Credit Union. And before we get started, I do just want to quickly acknowledge that we do understand that everyone has a lot going on in their lives right now. And we just want you to keep in mind that if there's anything we can do to help, please don't hesitate to contact Ardent, whether it's for borrowing needs or additional banking products, or just if you have questions or think you may need help. So just wanted to put that out there and remind everyone that the credit union is here to help. Today's presenter is Justin Goldman. Justin is the founder and CEO of RenoFi, a financial technology platform that empowers credit unions to offer best-in-class renovation financing. He, his wife Megan, and their 3 young children currently reside in Devon. Justin has been a lifelong entrepreneur, having started his first company as an undergraduate at Penn State University in 2003, and has been building companies ever since.
All right, it's awesome to be here. Thanks for having me, Ryan, and the rest of the Ardent team. Looking forward to answering everybody's questions and running everyone through Hgtv in real life, planning your home renovation. Make sure. All right, so today we are going to cover what to expect during the renovation process, how to pick the right general contractor for your project, some tips to keep you from blowing your budget, and how to compare your financing options, which Ryan will actually cover there at the end. So we're going to start right here with what to expect during the renovation process. So I have a little fun chart here. On the y-axis, on the vertical axis, you have happiness. So the higher you are in this graph, the happier folks are. And then along the x-axis, the bottom axis, you've got time. So from start to finish. And so this is just a quick high-level overview of what to expect. And later in this talk, we will dive deeper on some of these subjects. Getting started, the first phase, we call this the Hgtv binging phase. And we've all been here. In Pennsylvania, specifically the Philadelphia area, the average home age is about 60 years old. So if you bought a home recently, it's a pretty good chance it's not a young house. And when you buy an old house, the odds are that you're inheriting a wish list of items that you want to renovate. And we can't help watching shows like this and seeing these magical transformations and not dreaming about what it would be like to snap our fingers and transform our homes in this manner. So this is the Hgtv binging stage. Everyone's different. Some people spend a few years here. Some people spend a little bit longer. But I think we can all relate to that. But at some point, you move on. At some point, you move into the second stage, which we're calling the let's do this stage. And this could be possibly because you've been saving for a bunch of years and you finally have the cash that you need. Or it could be you got a new job, or it could be you have a aging parent moving in with you, or it could be your new company allows you to work from home and you need to rethink your home space, or it could be an unexpected arrival of a new kid that you weren't planning for and you need more space. Everyone has a different forcing function, but at some point, homeowners hit that. All right, it's time to stop dreaming and actually make reality happen. That's when you move into the initial budget and scope phase, and this really is just the first number that's in your head. When you decide you're going to renovate, you generally have some idea or some thought of how much you think you want to spend. Again, it could be tied to how much you saved. It could be tied to a bonus you're getting at work, or everyone's different. This number often comes from a variety of places. It could be because your neighbor renovated and they told you how much they paid. It could be watching Hgtv and seeing how much they say renovations cost. And also scope part of it, clearly what you think you want to tackle first. So you start there, and then you quickly will move into actually connecting with a real provider in the space. So it could be an architect, it could be a general contractor, it could be going into a kitchen design showroom. But that's the first point where your theory of what you think you're going to spend and what you think it's going to cost meets reality. And then you quickly from there move into what I call the I hate Chip and Joanna stage, which for anybody who has watched HGTV and has seen these shows, they look magical. You're sitting here and you're watching these unbelievable transformations happen before your eyes, and the cost seems pretty reasonable for everything that they did in that show and the before and after, and just how stark of a difference it is. That's part of the motivation here, as we talked about, that gets you off the couch. But then you have your first general contractor come to your house, they do the walkthrough, you tell them all the different things that you want to tackle, and you ask them on the spot, like, just give me a rough range. And the number that comes out of their mouth is 2 times or 3 times what you were thinking. And hence the I hate Chip and Joanna stage, which is also why on this happiness curve, you're hitting rock bottom. But at some point, you dust yourself off, you readjust your expectations, you eventually pick a partner. It could be a designer, it could be an architect, it could be a general contractor, it could be a design build firm. We'll talk about that later in the presentation. But at some point, you're off and running. And once you have that partner, you move into the finalizing the scope and budget phase. And this is a dance that you do along with the partner or partners that you've picked. The main point I want to make here is that, especially for the larger projects, this is not a straightforward process. It is an iterative process. You will go shopping for things like cabinets or floors or countertops, and you may have had some cost in mind that you wanted to spend for it, some budget in mind, and you realize that it was too low. And so you want to increase your budget for, say, countertops. But that money has to come from somewhere. And so you have to figure out what you're going to cut out. And so it is a iterative process. So hopefully after this, you'll go into it knowing that and won't be surprised and frustrated. It's part of the process. Just think about using a pencil. As you start to plan things out, everything is in pencil until the last possible minute, and then you lock it in. But you're going to be doing a lot of erasing, a lot of changing as you go. And then once you have your scope and your budget finalized, you'll have things called allowances. So you'll have your allowance for your cabinets, your allowance for your floors, your allowance for your countertops, and everything down to the knobs and the doors going on the closet. And then it's time to go pick these things. So you go shopping and you go to the showrooms. And for some people, this is like one of their most favorite parts of the renovation process. So for them, I kept it as a high on the happiness trail. There's definitely folks who don't like making decisions. You know, we all know those types of people. I have a lot of family and friends who are just like that, and nothing wrong with that. But for them, this might not be the most fun stage. It could be. There's a lot of options out there, as you can imagine. If you've ever shopped for paint colors, apply that to every single thing from faucets to doorknobs to you name it. So that's the selecting finishes phase. And then we move into the living through the renovation phase. So you've got it. Your permits have been pulled, your contractors are on site, and their shovels are hitting the ground. And there's generally 2 types of way people go through this process. A lot of people, especially people doing larger renovations, will move in with their parents or their in-laws or friends, just to get out of the house during the renovation. Other folks do what I call stay and pray, and they turn their laundry room into a makeshift kitchen or their garage into a makeshift kitchen for 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks, which is what you see here in this picture in the bottom right. And some folks are certainly lucky enough to be able to rent a whole new place during the renovation. Most of us, including myself, we're not lucky enough or fortunate enough to have that kind of extra cash laying around. And so we have to get scrappy. And so these are the 2 most primary ways that most folks deal with that. Obviously, That was one of the lower side. So I wanted to make one final point though before we get off of this slide, which is a major misconception that homeowners make, which is you hear about renovations taking 3 months, 4 months, 5 months sometimes, and the really large renovations can take 6, 7 months. So, and everybody fixates on the renovation period in terms of how long it is. And the reality is stages 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That is the bulk of the renovation process. It's the planning where a lot of time comes in. And so if it is, today we're in June. So if you think you're going to start a renovation in September and you're just getting off the couch now, you don't have an architect, you don't have plans, and you don't have a contractor, you are completely fooling yourself. These stages take a long time. If I'm just using my own example, our renovation took 4.5 months, and I'll talk about it in a moment. We finished it last November. It was a 9-month planning process to get to the 4.5-month renovation. Ours is a little bit larger, but you can give that as a general rule of thumb. Figure twice the amount of time planning, finding contractors, getting permits, all that kind of stuff versus the actual renovation process. So don't underestimate the time it takes. And so if you're motivated to get started soon, you want to get that clock going, get the ball rolling. And then this is just, on the bottom here, it says your general contractor's face when you tell him you want to start in a few weeks and he finds out you were their first call. General contractors often are the bearer of bad news. They're the ones helping homeowners realize that the budget that they had in mind is actually about half of what it's going to take to do the project. Or the general contractors explained to the homeowner that it would be impossible to start the renovation in 6 weeks, given that they have no plans, no contractor, no nothing yet. So this is just reiterating what I was just sharing. But after all of that, I promise you it's worth it. As I said, I just went through this myself. This is my wife and my 3 kids. We live in Devon. We've been here since 2013. We just finished our renovation in November, as I mentioned. You can see our kitchen pre-renovation to our kitchen post-renovation. On the left-hand side is our playroom, or was our playroom, pre-renovation, and then you can see our new great room post-renovation. So now we're going to get into a little bit more of the granular. I'll stop there. Lisa, I'm not sure if there's any questions that you want to throw out.
Justin, we do have a couple questions. One of our questions is, if you're doing a very small project, just like a kitchen or a bathroom, is it still effective to hire a contractor?
If you're savvy enough to be able to do your own renovations and you have the time and you have the confidence that you're not going to do damage to your house, the most cost-effective way, clearly, to renovate it is the DIY. Very few people truly have the variety of skill sets needed, from plumbing to electrician to carpentry to you name it. We have heard of folks trying to act as their own general contractor and then sub out the work that they're not capable of doing. But again, you would have to be somebody in the super upper echelon of skill sets to be able to pull that off. So in short, it's possible. It'll definitely save you money, but I would proceed with caution, and 9 out of 10 times, I would be recommending that you use a third-party professional that does 20, 30 of these a year versus yourself on YouTube.
All right. And one other question we have is, how do you begin to find someone to give you an estimate?
That's a great question, because it's not easy. Anybody who's made phone calls to contractors knows how hard it is sometimes to get a call back. We will cover that later in this presentation, or in one of the next two sections. So I'll save it for that.
All right, and a couple other questions we do have are about contractors, but I think you're covering that in the next section.
Yeah.
So we can move forward,
Cool.
and then I'll follow up with those questions.
Great. Yeah, if I don't cover something specific, just fire away. Okay, so I think one of the frameworks that I wanted to share was just helping everyone understand what type of contractor you're going to hire has a lot to do with what type of project you're doing, clearly. And one easy way to think about this is answering one question. Are you changing the footprint? Yes or no? Footprint being you are adding square footage, right? You're adding completely new space off the back or up top, or it could also just be structural. You're moving walls, you're opening floor plans. Either of those things would be considered footprint. If you're just taking an existing kitchen and putting in new cabinets and new floors and new everything, or taking an existing bathroom and same thing, or finishing a basement, that's not really changing the footprint. So that's the definition. So first we'll start with, if you're not changing the footprint, there's basically two options. One is you could hire a general contractor, or two, you could hire a kitchen and bath designer. And I'll explain the slight differences. If you hire a general contractor first, like I said earlier, they will give you allowances. Together you'll work on a budget that has allowances for flooring, kitchen, countertops, etc. And then you get to go shop and buy the things that you need. Oftentimes the general contractor will point you in the direction of their suppliers where they have good relationships, they've got discounts, and you'll go there and you'll pick the things out that you want. But technically you can go anywhere. You can buy your flooring from anywhere, you can buy your faucets or your appliances, anything you want from anywhere that you want. When you go with a kitchen and bath designer, you're typically buying everything through them. So it's kind of like the opposite. You're going to one showroom and everything's under one roof, and you're doing it all there. And then who installs it, oftentimes the kitchen and bath designer will have recommendations of people that they work with to do the install, or you could technically go find someone yourself. If you had to compare the two, the simplest way to put it is, if you want lots of options and you want lots of control, and especially if you're doing things a little bit customized, the general contractor is probably going to be the better path for you, as you'll have a lot more options. But if you like a really streamlined, simple process, you're going into one spot, it's all under one roof. The kitchen and bath design places like Bluebell Kitchens, for example, out by us, is a great example of having something under one roof and keeping the process super simple. From a cost perspective, there's all different ranges of general contractors, so it's hard to say which one's more cost effective than the other. If I had to say something, I would say the general rule of thumb, you'll probably save a little bit of money if you go the general contractor route. But like I said, it's all highly dependent on who you choose and what your budgets are and stuff. So that's the first one. And then moving over here, if you are changing the footprint, again, you basically have two options at the high level. And the first one is what is called a design build firm, meaning that it is a building firm that has architects, so that's the design side, and builders, general contractors, all under one roof. So same thing, streamlined. You're working with one company to design your entire project from start to finish. The second option is bringing together two partners. So you would go and hire an architect or a designer to help you do your plans, and then you would hire a separate general contractor to then build those plans. Oftentimes you find architects who work with 3 or 4 contractors, so it's not as if they've never worked together, hopefully, but it's not all under one roof, and it's more on you to coordinate and bring this team together. Again, you can't go wrong with either. RenoFi has worked with, Ardent has worked with homeowners who've gone through both processes many, many times, and oftentimes everyone's coming out super happy regardless of which way they go. So it's impossible to give blanket advice and steer you one way or the other. The design build firms, because they're really good at what they do and because they're all under one roof, can typically be a little bit more expensive. But the experience is a little bit more higher touch and a little bit more of a premium experience. So it depends on your budget, it depends on what you're optimizing for. I personally went through the architect, designer, and general contractor route. And some of my very good friends also just went through the design build and are super happy. So that's the super short version of how to think about where to even think about getting started as you're going to set off on your project. You can, if you go into how, for example, and you're starting to look for names, you'll see design build as a category. You'll see architect, designer, general contractor as a category. And if you're just driving around your area, you'll see plenty of kitchen and bath design studios where you can physically walk in, where typically a general contractor is not going to have a physical office for you to go into. Okay, so now I think, Lisa, this is probably where a lot of the questions will get covered. So here's some tips for finding a great partner. So the first one is what I call the play the word of mouth treasure hunt. I know it's 2020, and I know that we do everything on our phones and we Google everything and we search for everything from food to electricians, you name it, through our phone. When it comes to general contractors and design build firms, it's still pretty old school. 95% of the business that a general contractor gets is through word of mouth. So they don't invest a lot in great web presences. Most of them, there's obviously exceptions, but most of them don't invest a lot in great web presences and social media and Instagram and house profiles. Instead, like I said, it's old school. They just rely on doing an amazing job for their customers and then relying on those customers to talk about how good of a job that person did and make introductions for them. And so my advice at the highest level is not to rely online, not to rely on the websites that we all know that list general contractors and cold call. Instead, I highly recommend you get out there and you be social and you start networking and find and start having conversations with your local network to find who's had a renovation lately, who's happy with the person that they worked with, and get an introduction. Going back to one of the questions that Lisa asked earlier, or someone in the audience asked earlier about like how do you get someone to even call you back? How do you get quotes? A lot of it has to do with this. If a former customer introduces a general contractor, they know that is a very strong lead and that homeowner is less likely to be wasting their time with just trying to find information. And they're going to call that person back and they're going to treat that person like gold because they know how important referrals are for their business. Whereas if you just find someone's name on a website or you Google and find a contractor and you call them, they're going to know that lead is cold and wasn't a referral, and they're going to be less motivated to call you back. I know that might sound crazy, right? That contractors wouldn't be returning phone calls, or but you have to understand these guys are doing tons of different jobs, right? They're the accountant, they're the salesperson, they're the carpenter, they're the project manager, and so they have to guard their time super wisely. And the industry term is tire kickers, is what the name that they would have for a homeowner who's not super serious, who spends lots of time on the phone with the contractor, hasn't come out, hasn't given them a quote, and they don't go forward with the project. And that contractor didn't get paid for any of that time. So just something to keep in mind. Word of mouth is super important. It's the best way to find people today. Maybe that'll change in the future. I know there's lots of companies trying to tackle that problem, but as of today, it hasn't changed. The second bullet point is this is somewhat obvious, but you'd be surprised. Really make sure that the scope of your project is in their wheelhouse. So if you have a contractor who mainly does kitchens and bathrooms, and you want to do a second-story addition on your home, and the contractor tells you that they can do it, and they're probably not lying, they probably could do it, but it's not what they specialize in, that's not the person you want to be working with. You want someone who does exactly what you're having them do all day, every day for the last, number of years. So that's what I mean by in their wheelhouse. The third bullet, in their backyard, is sometimes a little bit of an overlooked one. Here in the Philadelphia area, obviously the median house price and median income of folks in the area is higher than maybe counties outside of the 5 counties around Philadelphia. And so oftentimes you'll have contractors who are willing to come from further away because they can do a bigger project and make more money by coming to a more affluent area than where they are personally coming from. And you have to be careful about that. A contractor who does jobs in your neighborhood all the time and lives 15 minutes away has a reputation, and his business or her business is built on the success of their brand in that area. And so they're much less likely to do something that's going to damage their reputation in an area where they get all their business. A person coming from an hour or an hour and a half away doesn't have that. And secondly, it's just harder for them to come back out and do stuff when they live so far away. So I really recommend, when you're looking at contractors, is finding someone who does lots of jobs in your area and isn't traveling too far from home, and their team isn't traveling too far from home to get there. Something that most people don't think about. The fourth one is avoid chucking a truck for the big project. So chucking a truck is a name for basically a contractor who's only does 1 or 2 jobs a year, doesn't have anybody on his staff, which might be okay for small projects. But if you're going to do a large project, you want a general contractor, or if it's a design build firm, they're already going to be bigger. But if you're doing a larger project and you're hiring a general contractor, you want someone who's built a successful enough business where they actually have people on staff. It doesn't have to be a lot, but if they don't have any full-time team members, that to me would be a red flag and something that you would probably want to stay away from for a large project. So that's the avoid chuck and a truck. The next one is think partner, not foe. Oftentimes I hear homeowners talking about getting quotes and looking at the contract, and they have a very adversarial mindset about this person that they're going to basically be marrying for the next 6 or 12 months, however this project goes along. You guys have to work together as a team. And so that's what I mean by think partner, not foe. They're not out to get you. They're looking to have a successful project where they make money and it was worth their time and effort. And most importantly for them, that you're so happy that you go off and talk about their success, your success with the project, and send them referrals for the long term. So go into it with that mindset of partner, not foe. And then on the transparent side, I know a lot of homeowners, and I was the same way, who think that they can't tell the contractors their budget because the contractors are just going to take advantage of them and price it whatever it is to get the most money out of them as possible. That's where the whole quote side of it comes in. So if you're transparent with somebody and say, hey, my budget is X, and this is the most that I can spend, and here's my wish list, and I understand that I probably can't do everything. Essentially, you're just asking them how far down can you go with that? How far down can this contractor take you with that budget? And then really, you're just going to compare that to 1 or 2 other quotes, and you'll find out if someone is way off. I think it's better to share your number up front and really work with them and think about them as a partner, versus trying to hold back or lie to them and tell them your budget is $75K when it's really $125K because you're trying to hold it back. Like my neighbor right now is going through this process himself, and he made this mistake, and he was holding it back this whole time, and the contractor was great and was really, designing and budgeting to the number that he gave him. And then they wasted a month going back and forth only for him to tell him at the last second that he actually had more, and they could have just gotten to the end result a lot faster. The next one, which is don't go quote crazy, kind of plays into a lot of things I already just said, or relates to a lot of the things that I just ran through. But for a general contractor to come out to your house or a design build firm, walk around with you, spend a half hour, and give you a ballpark number based on what you said, that's not a big deal. That's easy. But if you're going to ask them for a real quote, where they have to go back, put together a full proposal, come out, do measurements, all that kind of stuff, oftentimes they can put in 20, 25, 30, 35 hours of cost estimating, having their subs, their electricians, their plumbers come to your house and give them quotes which they have to incorporate into theirs. So it's a lot of time and effort that goes into that, which is why contractors are trying to feel you out during that early phase and see how serious you are. Do they want to commit to giving you a full proposal if they don't get the sense that you're really serious about going forward? So out of respect to the future partners and to the industry, I recommend highly that you don't go get 5, 6, 7 quotes. I don't think it's ethical, knowing what I know now about the industry. And secondly, if you're doing that, unless you're an amazing actor, the contractors are going to be really good at sniffing that out, that they're just one of 7, and they might not call you back, or you might not even be able to get a quote. So I highly recommend that you focus on 1 or 2 folks, get really ingrained with them, get a really strong quote. And obviously, if you get something that's way out of whack, say you get 2 quotes and one is really high and one's really low, maybe you want to go get a third. That's fair. But if you get 2 quotes and they're both right there, it's probably a pretty good indication of that, generally speaking, they're in the right ballpark. And then lastly, this is a pretty important one. You've got to compare apples to apples. So just because you have 2 quotes that look the same, you have to really create your own spreadsheet, take the information from both quotes, because they're not going to be formatted in the exact same way, and compare side by side. What is the allowance for cabinets? What is the allowance for countertops? What is the allowance for flooring? And break that out, because you might find out that, wow, this guy came in, or this company came in 10% lower, but they're 30% lower on my allowances, which might work for you, but you have to go out and shop. So don't take it for granted that you're going to be able to easily look at 2 quotes and immediately compare them. It's going to take work. You need to pull up a spreadsheet or a pencil and paper, whatever you're comfortable with, and compare side by side. So I'll stop there. Lisa, any of the questions that have been coming in that I did not cover?
We do have one question specifically about design build firms and really how to respond to the initial budget question. And if it's possible to get the design first and then the cost.
That's a great question. So the way design build firms typically work, and I can't speak for all of them, is that you'll actually sign 2 contracts. You'll sign a design contract first, and then you'll sign a build contract second. So when you go into the design build firm, they generally are pretty cost effective on the design side, because it's one of their sales tactics, and it's a smart sales tactic, they're trying to rope you in into their business in an ethical way, to be clear. But they're pretty cost effective, whereas if you compare going to an architect or a designer, you might be paying more for your design than if you go with a design build firm. So for example, our neighbor who just used a design build firm, I think they spent about $2,500 for their design. And they're doing a pretty large renovation. So that's pretty cheap for a large home renovation. And so you sign that contract, you put that money up front, and then when the design's done, the build side of the company will then come back with a cost estimate, a detailed cost estimate, like I just talked about, of what it's going to take to build what you and the designer just designed. Technically, you have the right to go shop those plans, the designs that you came up with, to other general contractors. You wouldn't go to a design build firm because you already skipped the design part, but you could go to other general contractors and get them to bid that exact same project. Most people end up building a very strong rapport and a lot of trust with the design build firm. And I would say, based on past conversations with the design build founders, I think it's like 9 out of 10 stick with the design build firm to finish it. But you still have that option and you're not locked into anything. That was a great question.
And that was our last question for now.
All right. I think that's it for me, right? Oh no, one more, sorry. I forgot this last slide. Okay, so tips for not blowing the budget. First one is be thorough. Everything adds up. And like I said, I just went through this myself. So everything adds up. And it's easy for that first contractor to come by and give you the high level quote, or even to go through the detailed quote. But even that doesn't always include everything. So for example, you might get a quote from a contractor, but they left out the appliances. So refrigerator, microwave, things like that. They might just be assuming that you're going to go figure out yourself. And those things can add up, to thousands and thousands of dollars. And so you don't want to be surprised about that. Or furniture. In our case, we created a couple new rooms in our renovation, and furnishing these things is not cheap. And so I highly recommend that you be as thorough as possible and think about every possible thing that you're going to need to spend money on due to this renovation, so that you can build the most proper budget you can. The next one is stress testing the allowances. I know Megan and I, when we were first getting the allowances from our contractor, it seemed like a lot of money, right? It was thousands of dollars for X and thousands of dollars for Y. And at a glance, we were nodding like, yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I can't imagine spending more on that. And we made the mistake of getting pretty far down before actually doing our research to see how far that money goes in the real world, and going and looking at countertops and going and looking at floors and getting quotes. And we realized pretty quickly that, we were blowing our budget on several different things, and we had to go back and iterate and figure out what we're going to cut back, because, our budget was our budget. So stress test those allowances as soon as you possibly can. Go get a sense of the difference between $5,000 kitchen cabinets, $2,000 kitchen cabinets, $10,000 kitchen cabinets, and really understand, what's right for you in your project. And then lastly, stick to the plan. If your budget is hard, if your budget's fixed, and at a moment of rational thought, you designed your budget based off of research and looking at your own personal financial plan, don't get caught up in the moment at the store and spend 20% more on something than you had planned, without the willingness to go take something else away. So we see that oftentimes, and a lot of times it also has a big impact on timeline. So when you ask contractors, what's the number one reason why projects take longer than they were supposed to, they point the finger right back at the homeowner and they say the homeowner changes their mind, or they can't make their selection finish. They can't make their selection choices. And so not only does sticking to the plan help you keep on budget, but it'll also help you keep on time. That's all I got. Oh. That's not me. Any other questions for me, Lisa?
Nope, that was it. And now we're going to pass it off to Ryan.
All right, thanks, Justin. A lot of good information there.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to kind of talk now and shift gears a little bit now that we've kind of learned about how to plan for this renovation project. It's time to figure out how you're going to pay for it. So there are a few different options when it comes to financing a home renovation. So we're going to touch on each one of those and kind of talk about maybe what the pros and cons are of each option. So I'm going to go through that with everyone. So one option is to refinance your mortgage and borrow additional money on that loan. So this is typically referred to as a cash out refinance. Of course, one of the requirements to do this is you have to have enough available equity in your house to cover the cost of your renovation projects. So, when it comes to financing a renovation, your cash out refi loan or your cash out refinance mortgage is probably not your best option for a couple reasons. One of those is you do risk losing the interest rate that you have on your current mortgage. So if you have a really low, really strong interest rate, and you're going to possibly risk losing that because you are refinancing to a new loan. Typically, if you're taking cash out when you're refinancing, that's going to come with a little bit of a higher interest rate than just a straight up refinance of your existing mortgage. So something to keep in mind. At the same time, you're getting all of that money right away once you go to closing. So not really ideal when you're planning a renovation project like Justin had described earlier, where this can last 3 or 4 months. You don't really need all of the money up front. You're paying your contractor or your builder or designer in increments throughout the process. So having all the money up front and starting to pay interest right away is probably not a great option. At the same time, think about how you're going to qualify for this. Like we had mentioned, you have to have enough equity, obviously, in the house if you're going to refi your mortgage and tap into that. But the problem is a typical standard cash out refi is going to qualify you based on your home's current value. So you're not going to be able to take advantage of those improvements that you're doing to your home that should be increasing the value of your property. So another thing to keep in mind if you're thinking about just looking at a cash out refi in order to fund your renovation project. So, they're going to typically come with some longer closing times as well, from the time you apply to the time you actually have access to the money compared to some other financing options that we'll talk about in a moment. And then there's also fees involved, closing costs, things like that typically come with a mortgage that you may want to think about before you decide to apply for a cash out refinance, okay? So probably the most common or most highly utilized loan product for financing home improvement or home renovation is going to be your home equity line of credit, or a HELOC. HELOCs are great because it does give you ongoing access to the funds. So once you close on your HELOC and have access to that line of credit, you can draw money from that as needed. So when you need to pay the contractor, you simply pull the funds out of the home equity line of credit, write them a check, and you're not sitting there with all of this money paying interest from day one, like you would be with a cash out refinance. So it's nice in that respect that you only really pay interest on the money that you use, and you can access that money really at any time when you need it and when it's convenient for you. The downside to the HELOC is it does usually come with a variable interest rate. So you do run the risk that the interest rate could increase and increase your monthly payment as well. And again, you're qualifying based off of the home's current value. So you're not going to be able to take advantage of those improvements, which could limit how much you're actually able to borrow. This could mean not being able to complete the renovation that you would like. It could mean having to come out of pocket to cover the rest of the cost. So neither option is ideal, but that's typically what you're going to be faced with when going with a HELOC or even a cash out refi, where it's not going to use the after renovation value. Okay. So another option is a construction loan. So again, this would be a mortgage where you're borrowing to finance a renovation project. This is more of a product that is designed for this scenario, I guess we could say, versus a cash out refi. So this is a little bit of a better fit if you are looking to finance a renovation. And the big advantage to a construction loan is you're going to get approved based on the after renovation value. So again, talking about the HELOC, talking about your standard cash out mortgage refinance, where you're using your current home value and you don't really get to leverage that increased property value that you're going to realize once you complete the renovation. With a construction loan, you do. So you can typically qualify for a larger loan amount, which is a huge plus. The downside again to this is it is a mortgage. There's going to be fees, there's going to be closing costs that are more significant than if you just went with a traditional HELOC, which typically comes with little to no fees. And then you may have to pay mortgage insurance. So depending on how much you have to borrow, that could be an added cost that you'll have to keep in mind. So what we did at Ardent and partnering with RenoFi is kind of take the best features of the HELOC, the best features of a construction loan to create this Ardent renovation loan. So again, like we talked about on the previous slide, the big advantage with a construction loan and with our Ardent renovation loan is that we're going to qualify you based on the after renovation value of your property. So once the appraisal is done, they're going to appraise it based on the plans and specs for your project, and they're going to determine what the value is going to be of your home once the project's completed. We're going to qualify you for your loan based on that amount. So it does increase your borrowing power compared to just a traditional HELOC. At the same time, the renovation loan looks and kind of feels a little bit more than like a HELOC than your construction mortgage, where you have access to a credit line for the first 2 years. And then once you complete the project, it converts to a 20-year loan that you pay back. So, this has, again, features that kind of pull from both of those products to kind of make that really perfect, ideal product for financing a renovation loan. Another plus to the Ardent renovation loan is that we can typically close in 2 to 3 weeks. So it's in most cases more similar to a home equity line of credit in terms of the amount of time it takes to get to closing and get you access to the line of credit. And then, you still have the flexibility over the first 2 years to draw from that line of credit as needed, as you need to pay for your projects. So again, kind of really a hybrid of those two products that have always kind of been the traditional way for consumers to borrow to finance a renovation, to really try to provide the best possible financing option for our members here at Ardent.
Ryan, we do have a couple questions for you and Justin. So Justin, if you could come back, we do have a question for you. First, how much should be paid upfront, and when is upfront? Is it the day that you sign, or the day that the contractors actually start?
Typically, a contractor is going to require some down payment upfront to ensure that you are serious about the job and to get your spot in line. We like to see no more than 15% in the contracts that we review, and generally closer to 10% as a down payment.
All right, and one last question that we do have is, how do you know if an estimate is too high or if it's reasonable?
At the end of the day, the only way you're going to know that is by getting a second or a third quote. When you work with Ardent, which in turn means that you're working with RenoFi, that's our job. So we help Ardent customers review the plans. We do an entire feasibility analysis on the quote, and we come back and share our findings with the homeowner and Ardent to identify is the quote too high or too low, or is it right on the money. If you're not going through Ardent and you're not getting the concierge service of RenoFi, like I said, it's going to take you getting a couple quotes, going back to the word of mouth game that I mentioned, sharing it with people who recently went through renovation is also helpful. But if you're just looking at one quote, it's going to be really tough. Although, and I'll say one last thing, a huge part of a quote is the allowances. It's what you're spending on cabinets and countertops and everything else. The actual labor and then some of the markups, it's definitely significant, but if something's too high or too low, I would be looking first at are the allowances reasonable? You know, as I said earlier, the concept of testing your budget early by going out and shopping and understanding what $5,000 gets you or $10,000 gets you for X, Y, or Z is going to help. So I'd also just say get informed.
Right, and that was our last question. Thank you, Justin.
No problem. Thanks for having me, guys.
Okay, so thank you, Justin, for providing some great information, and we would like to thank everyone for attending. There will be a short survey that we will be sending out, and we would love to hear your feedback to help us improve for our future workshops. In addition, we will be sending out an email with a form attached that you can fill out if anyone would like to receive more information about Ardent's renovation loan. Okay, and thank you very much again for joining, and I hope everyone has a great rest of the day.